Welcome back, learners. Today we are going to know about principle of inheritance and variation. In this chapter we are going to study how the character are passed from the parent to offspring. Why offspring? Offspring means the children, they resemble their parents and they are not exactly identical to their parents, and how the genes, they are controlled by a trait. We will learn everything, all the definitions in this particular video, and we will know all the important things that are important for need purpose. So in this, it is very important video, so stay tuned till the end. Important basic terms is inheritance. What is inheritance? Transmission of character from the parent to offspring, that is the inheritance. For example, characters like tallness, brown hair, these are the parent may have these traits, tallness, brownness, and these are passed, these traits, they are passed to the child. So the traits that are passing to the child, that is the inheritance. That means the traits are inherited by the offspring through their parents. What is variation? Difference among individuals of the same species are called variation. All humans are same species but different in their height, color, blood group, hair type. Everyone have their own hair color, everyone have their own blood group and hair type. So there are differences between human, they are the variations. Now what is a character? A general like height, tall and dwarf, these is an example of a character. What is a trait? A specific form of character is known as trait. For example, tall and dwarf, they are the traits of the character. Like height is the character, and tall and dwarf are the traits. We will know in detail what are character and trait. If you are confused with the differences, we can discuss it again. What is inheritance, variation, character and trait? It is very important to understand it, because if we don't understand this particular thing, so it will be hard for you to understand other things. Inheritance is the feature that is passed from the parent to offspring. It causes similarities. The child resembles the parents and they come through the gene that are from the parents. For example, daughter has a mother's eye color. This is an inheritance. Variations means the difference that is seen among individual, and it causes dissimilarities, like a child is not exactly same as the parent or sibling. That is a variation that comes due to the different gene, recombinant mutation, environment as well. So for example, two brothers have different height. So this is an example of variation. Inheritance means which we gain from the parents, like hair type, eye color or blood group, that is an inheritance. And we have a sibling which have different height, like tall or small. So this height, that is a variation that is seen. The difference that is seen, that is a variation. So inheritance give resemblance, whereas variation give difference. Inheritance means transmission of character from parent to offspring, whereas variation is the difference in the character among individuals of the same species. Now character means a general feature that we study, like height, the flower color, seed shape, eye color, these are the character. And traits means what type of height it has having, like tall and dwarf. This is an example of, these are the traits. Means specific form of a character is a trait. Like the height is tall and dwarf, so height is the character and the trait is tall and dwarf. Whereas the flower color, for example, flower color is the character and the trait, like purple and white, they are the traits. So character is big category and trait is specific type of, inside the category the trait is there. Character is question and trait is like answer. For example, what is a plant height? That is in character, and trait is tall and dwarf, this is in trait. So now we are going to study about the Mendel's experiment. So what is this Mendel experiment? It was during the mid 19th century that was made, this Mendel experiment, to understand the inheritance. So George Mendel conducted an hybridization experiment on a garden pea for 7 years. That was from 1856 to 18 63. So these are the years, these 7 years. So these 7 years and proposed the law of inheritance in the living organism. So during his investigation in the inheritance pattern, it was first time the statistic analysis and mathematic logic they were applied to the problem in biology, and his experiment has a large sample size that give it credibility to the data that he collected. So he confirmed the interference from the experiment on the successive generation of his test plant. So the result that they gain from this experiment, he investigated the character in the garden pea plant that were manifested as two opposite traits like tall and dwarfed. So yellow or green seeds. And this allowed him to set up a basic framework for the rule governing inheritance, which was expanded on the later scientists to account for all the diverse natural observations and complexity inheritance in them. So he conducted an artificial pollinations and cross pollination experiment and used several true breeding pea lines. A true breeding line is the one that have undergone continuous self pollination. It has some stable traits, inheritance, and express for several generations. So he selected 14 true breeding pea plants variety, and they were similar from the one character that was contrasting. So some of the contrasting traits selected were smooth and wrinkled seed, yellow and green seed, inflated and constructed green and yellow pods, and tall and dwarf plant. So you have known the table. In that table it is given the character and contrasting traits like stem height, flower color, flower position, pod shape, pod color, seed shape, and seed color. The contrasting traits are tall and dwarf, violet white, axial terminal, inflated constructed, green yellow, round wrinkle, and yellow green. So these are the contrasting traits of the Mendel in the pea plant. So what is inheritance of one gene? For example, the experiment was carried out by Mendel where he crossed the tall and dwarf plant to study the inheritance of one gene. So he collected the seed to produce a result of this cross and then grew them to a great plant of the first hybrid generation. So this generation is called the filial progeny or F1 generation. So Mendel observed that all the F1 progeny plant were tall like one of its parent and none were dwarfed. So he made a similar observation for the other pair of traits. So he found that the F1 always resemble either one of the parent. So the trait of the one parent was not seen in them. So Mendel then self-pollinated the tall F1 plant, and he found that the filial 2 generation, F2 generation, the sum of the offspring were dwarfed, and the character that was not seen in the F1 generation was now expressed. So, this proportion of plant that were the dwarf were 1 by 4th of the F2 plant, while the 3/4 of the F2 plant were tall. So, the tall and dwarf trait were identical to the parent type and did not show any blending. That is, all the offspring were either tall or dwarf. None were in between the heights. So similar results were obtained with the other trait that he studied. Now you can see this in the figure that is given here. The tall and dwarf were cross, and then self selfing was done in F1 generation. So all the four were, three were tall and one were dwarf. So this is represent the monohybrid cross in the diagram. Similar results were obtained. He studied the F1 generation, the F2 generation. Both the traits were expressed in a proportion of 3:1, that is 3 tall and 1 dwarf, and the contrasting trait did not show any blending of either F1 or F2 stage. So based on the observations, he proposed that something was being stably passed down unchanged from the parent to offspring through the gamete. So over a successive generation, he called these things as a factor. Now we call them a gene. The factor is now called the gene. So gene therefore are the unit of inheritance. They contain an information that is required for expression of a particular trait in an organism. So gene which codes for a pair of contrasting trait, they are known as an allele. So these are slightly different from of that of the gene. So if we use the alphabetical symbol for each gene, Then the capital letter is used for the trait expression at the F1 stage, and the small alphabets on the other trait. So for example, the tall T is used for tall trait, whereas small t is used for the dwarf. So T and T, that is capital T and small t, are allele of each other. Hence, in plants, the pair of allele for the height would be capital T, capital T, capital T, small t, and small t, small t. So Mendel also proposed that in true breeding, tall and dwarf P variety, that the allele pair of the gene for the height are respectively. So capital T and capital T, small t are called identical or homozygous. So capital T and small t, they are called the genotype of the plant, while the descriptive terms like tall and dwarf are phenotype. So when what then would be the phenotype of the plant that had a genotype capital T small t? So he found the phenotype of F1 heterotype capital T capital small t to be exactly like the capital T parent in appearance. So he proposed that in a pair of dissimilar factor, one dominant and the other one, that is a recessive one. So the dominant factor while the other is recessive. So in this case, the capital T tallness is dominant over the small t dwarfness, and that is a recessive. So he observed an identical behavior for all the other characters, trait pairs that he studied. So it is convenient to use the capital and lowercase as an alphabet symbol to remember this concept of dominance and recessive. Capital T, small t is heterozygous. Why? We will know in the next video. So stay tuned to Biomindscape for this chapter.